Here.
Vice Chairman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Boyd. Alderman French. Present. Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Here.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderman Carter.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Chairwoman Young.
Present.
9 present. We have a quorum.
Okay, the purpose of our meeting today is to talk about the policy of force on the police, from the police. And so this is something that I don't think that we've ever publicly discussed or heard about, so we don't know what parameters are. And that is what we're here to do today, is to learn and to ask questions, to be informed so that we can have conversations in the future. And with that, I'll ask Director Gray to come and make his presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. The Public Safety Department has been very busy over the past few months. One of the biggest moves towards transparency is that we started having our first public safety meeting. Our first one was on July 17th at 1520 Market, where each of our department heads presented the measurables for their operations. This included fire, neighborhood stabilization, SEMA, excise, corrections, the building division, and the police department. This meeting is open to the public, and the next one is scheduled for September 19th. Again, this meeting is open and it's very informative. That brings me to the meeting today to talk about policing. What I found is being a police officer in an urban setting is a very difficult sometimes to be able to do the job. We should never forget that some have paid the ultimate price in the line of duty. And we need to be thankful that so many men and women are willing to put their lives on the line to save us. The vast majority of our police officers are not our problem. They are actually part of the solution. They have been doing a tremendous job over the years. And over the last 6 years, our crime in the city of St. Louis is down by 50%. We do give our police officers a great deal of authority. And we also know that our department serves and protects the people of St. Louis. And having respect for our citizens must remain top of mind. Mayor Slay, Chief Dotson, and I take that responsibility very seriously. That is why Chief Dotson makes it very clear to our officers what the rules are, then trains them to abide by them. While all of our officers are well trained, they are still human. And there are some times that we have to investigate, discipline, and remove officers who cannot live up to the very high standards that we set in the city of St. Louis. In the last 2 years, 20 St. Louis police officers have either been fired, resigned, or retired while facing disciplinary charges, internal disciplinary charges. We are working every day to do better. The mayor has asked me to develop a policy for the Citizens Oversight Board, and he's given me 3 main principles to follow. First, improve transparency. Second, improve community relations with our police officers. And third, treat our police officers fairly. Myself, Chief Dotson, have been working with Alderman Kennedy since April to achieve these goals. He's also asked me to develop a budget and a policy for body cameras. I've engaged several aldermen in conversations throughout the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I will be presenting to Ways and Means next Tuesday on September 16th some of the research that I've been able to gather. While research shows that the cameras help police officers, it also reassures the public in reference to the incidents that occur. And finally, the one reason that I took this job was because the mayor asked me to continue our police efforts towards making it reflect the makeup of the city of St. Louis. I have been working with Chief Dotson, police officers, then NAACP to better recruit for African American officers for our department. We'll be traveling to Arkansas Pine Bluff for the first time ever on October 1st to recruit not only for police, but for fire as well. I strongly believe we can continue to grow our minority participation in both departments. It's important to give Chief Dotson credit in this area. His first 3 classes were 50% African Americans. As a matter of fact, the last class, 13 out of 25. Again, I would like to thank the chief publicly for working hard to find quality candidates, because it separates St. Louis City from the rest of our community. We not only have one of the best and most professional police departments in the country, we can acknowledge that we are working hard to make it better. With that said, Chief Dotson.
Richard, I think there was one question. We were listening to the statistics, and you said that within a certain period of time, we missed that period of time. So
6 years.
6 years. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, and thank you again for the chance to have a conversation. The director said it very well, and so I won't belabor the points that he did. I'm very proud of the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. They do great work, and they have done great work, and they're going to continue to do great work. Over the last 18 or 19 months that I've been fortunate enough to be serving in this role, we've made significant changes. We've transitioned into local control. We've redrawn the district boundaries for the police department. We've moved into our new headquarters, and today we're issuing, and I will give you a copy, and Sergeant Rutter will pass it out. This is our use of force policy, the one that guides all of the use of force in the Metropolitan Police Department. But there are 3 new sections at the end of this order, which we've been working on for many months with the Police Officers Association, with the City Councilor, with a variety of people, called the Force Investigative Unit. A unit inside the Metropolitan Police Department with specific training to look at use of force when a police officer is required to use their firearm. And I don't expect you to digest it completely today, but I'll be happy to talk to you about it in the future. But the Force Investigative Unit is a very progressive step for law enforcement, a very progressive step for the city of St. Louis. What it does is identifies a clear path for internal investigations and criminal investigations of police officer shootings if necessary, and shows that all of our police shootings will be passed to the Circuit Attorney's Office for their review. So I give you our entire use of force policy along with the new sections that we've been working on since earlier this year, well before Ferguson, well before the police shooting at Riverview, and represents a best practice in law enforcement from around the country. So the Force Investigating Unit is now part of the everyday operations of the Metropolitan Police Department. So I thought the best way to approach this is I would be happy to start with answering your questions. I could do a presentation, but I think probably focusing in on your questions may help to move this process along. I will piggyback on one thing that Director Gray said before we begin. The officers in the Metropolitan Police Department have done a fantastic job in reducing crime. In the last 10 years, 2006 was the biggest year for crime in the city of St. Louis. Since 2006, crime in the city of St. Louis, overall crime, is down over 50%. And while I realize that if you're a victim of crime, the statistic does not matter, what it does show is that 50% fewer people are victimized. That's significant progress. Not all because of the police department. We have a significant piece of it. Economic development, demographic shifts, a variety of things have an impact. But the city of St. Louis is moving in the right direction, both from a policing perspective, a growth perspective, and economic perspective. And I think we all need to realize that and share in that. So thank you.
All right. Based on seniority, I don't see Alderman Bosley here. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and also thank you for calling the meeting based upon our request. Would you, this is the policy, good morning, Chief.
How are you?
This is the policy for the use of force in general, correct?
It talks about all uses of force, and I'll...
That's what I would like for you to break down. What does that mean, and what are the different types?
And I have some subject matter experts here, so if we get into questions that are specific, but I'll give you the higher level overview. We train officers in the use of force continuum, that there are steps along the way that officers utilize to try to de-escalate situations, and really that's the key. We train that officers should use the least amount of force necessary to overcome resistance or to effect an unlawful arrest. So merely, let's say, command presence is our first level. A police officer showing up in a uniform many times has the ability to calm or to quell a situation. As you move through the force continuum, if officer presence, mere presence doesn't work, we move to verbal commands. stop resisting, put your hands behind your back, drop the weapon. Those types of commands that officers are clearly trained to use. As we move through it, if command presence and verbal commands are not sufficient, we move to open hand techniques, things like slaps, pairing, trying to keep open hand techniques. Arm bars, arm locks, those types of things are included in the open hand techniques. If those are inefficient or ineffective in overcoming the resistance that's presented to them, the officers then move to closed hand techniques, which could include punches, kicks, those types of activities, again, to stop the resistance, to overcome the resistance that the individual is. Then we move into intermediate weapons, and intermediate weapons can include pepper spray, can include baton strikes to areas that are considered non-deadly force. That would be to arms, elbows, joints, knees, legs, as an example. A baton strike to the head is considered deadly force, just as an example of how a baton strike can be considered deadly force if it's administered in such a way. Then we move to devices like electric conductive devices, more commonly known as tasers, but devices like that, and ultimately, if those are ineffective or unsuccessful, you move to deadly force. Which
now, is that separate? Is this a separate category that you're mentioning right now, the electrical devices, or is that a part of the intermediate?
It is along the force continuum, and it is part of the use of force policy.
Is it a part of the intermediate?
So it moves to pepper mace, batons, electric conductive devices, and then ultimately deadly force.
Okay.
And does that answer your question?
That answers.
Okay.
Yeah, continue. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so ultimately you get to a point where an officer is confronted with a situation where deadly force is authorized, and our policy requires that an officer has to reasonably believe that a subject poses a significant threat to the officer or others, and that deadly force is needed or authorized to make a lawful arrest or keep that individual from harming others or escaping. So an officer, the standard is, and it's backed up by research from the Department of Justice, from court cases, from policies around the country, that an officer has to reasonably believe that the use of deadly force is authorized because the resistance of the suspect puts his life, her life, or the lives of others in danger. And so that's the legal standard we get to for the use of deadly force.
Are there any national standards in relationship or commonalities among police departments? I
would say if you look along the spectrum of use of force policies, ours is probably more detailed than most, probably on the more conservative side, and the foundation comes from the Department of Justice, the COPS office, about use of force, along with legal cases which have been tried all the way to the Supreme Court, which talks about the reasonable standard that the officer at the time that the force was used had knowledge or reasonably believed, and not hindsight 20/20, but what the officer was actually aware of when the situation occurred. Mm-hmm. That the use of force was reasonable, and so the reasonable is the standard.
And so give us what would be a few examples of what would be reasonable.
Certainly. When we talk about the use of force continuum, we talked about the multiple steps along the way. It would be nice if in every situation the officer had time to move along the continuum and touch every one of those steps. Many times you immediately jump to a situation where mace is needed, or tasers are needed, or deadly force is needed. So an officer has to make those decisions on the ground. So certainly confronted with a gun is a situation where deadly force is authorized. Certainly a knife within 21 feet. David Klinger from the University of Missouri has done several studies and research, and the fatal distance, the ability for an officer to respond to eliminate a threat that is coming towards him with an edged weapon is within 21 feet. What that means is that the study shows, the research shows, that a suspect armed with a knife can close the gap of 21 feet before a police officer has the time to respond and defend themselves. And so therefore 21 feet and in is considered a deadly force encounter with an edged weapon. Outside of 21 feet, although it is a knife and the subject is, it would not be considered a deadly force encounter.
That's a study with the Justice Department?
That's the standard that's used throughout the country, and David Klinger from the University of Missouri has done some research on that and could certainly talk about that more detail. But that is the standard that is used throughout the country. It's 21 feet.
Do you know, can you speak a little bit about how many use of deadly force in the past 5 years has happened in the city?
If I can just grab a piece of paper.
And then if you also have the racial breakdown of that.
To answer the question most directly, the racial breakdown I do not have, but the use of force in the city, so far year to date, there have been 2 police shootings. We'll talk about shootings. We're talking about police shootings. There have been 2 police shootings, 6 police shootings year to date. 2 of them were fatal. Going backwards, in 2013, there were 12 police shootings. I believe in 12 or 13, there was 1 involving an ATF agent. In 12, there were 18 police shootings.
What did you say about 13? Was it? It was
12.
12.
Yeah, I'll go backwards.
And no
20
fatalities?
I just got to sort through the papers,
Okay.
but I do have that information. Let's see, 13, there were 12. In 2012, there were 18. 2011, 15. 2010, 8. 2009, 15. And I do have a breakdown. It'll take me just a minute to give you the numbers of the fatalities, but I do have that information.
Okay. Do you have it broken down by race and by gender? Or?
I don't have it with me, but I can get it for you.
Okay. So, you know, we're just seeing this, so it...
Absolutely.
Right,
and Alderman, and I've said this before, I would be happy to come and talk to this committee as frequently as necessary, as frequently as you would like. I will tell you, 3 hours is a very long block. There was, as a couple of examples, there's a meeting this morning going on right now, which I attended for the first part. The COPS office, Ron Davis, the director of the COPS office, brought in Commissioner Chuck Ramsey from Philadelphia, the head of NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, some other chiefs to talk about some of the activities that have been going on in the region. I would like to have attended more of that because I think it was very useful, but this committee's meeting was much more important to me, but there's value to that. 3 hours is a long time, and I'd be happy to come back any time that you want to talk about any topic that we want.
Are St. Louis police officers trained to handle mentally ill individuals? And if so, do all the officers get it, and how much?
Crisis intervention training is what we call it, CIT officers, crisis intervention trained officers. We do train, but let's have a real conversation about the status of mental health and mental health services in our community. Police officers, in many cases, have become the face of government in some communities, have become the face of medical services, mental health services. So to answer your question, we offer a 40-hour block of instructions to train our officers in an awareness phase of how to deal with individuals that have mental health issues. Over half of the department has attended that training, and we're quite proud of it, and it's ongoing and continuing training. But there is no scenario where I would say that a police officer in the city of St. Louis, or any police officer outside of any clinical training, is a true health care provider. So as we've seen cutbacks in Medicaid programs and mental health services, police officers have really become the front line in the defense, and that's why we value the CIT program, and that's why we continue to train officers in that 40-hour block.
And all officers get it?
Where all officers will be trained, but so far over half of the department right now is trained in those, in mental health programs.
And so when they're faced with a possibility of somebody's weapon coming at them, they're not required to make any statement, you know, you're threatening my life, I will shoot you, or... And
I like the question, because it's easy for us to sit here in an environment and say, that would be nice. The commands, stop police, drop the weapon, should facilitate that, and then if the suspect doesn't respond to that, certainly the officer has to make, in some cases, life and death decisions. But officers are trained and are continually retrained in command presence, de-escalation, voice commands, all of those things. So certainly is a tool that they have, and we talked about in the use of force continuum, presence, voice commands, stop, drop the weapon, those types of things. But a conversation and a dialogue, it should be stop, drop the weapon, and the direction should be followed by the suspect.
Okay. I'll stop there, Madam Chairman. If I have the opportunity later, I may have some other questions after looking at the material. Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt.
Morning. Thank you, Chief. I've been in one of those situations, frankly, only once, where a police officer gave me directions, which I followed to the letter because he thought something was happening, and so I sat when he told me to sit. And when he came over, he actually recognized me, which was a good thing, so that was nice. Also, the Citizens Academy is very helpful. We did go over the use of force, although we didn't have this lengthy of a process for that, so I appreciate that. The Public Safety Director talked about body cameras, and one of the things that I looked at is that there's sort of a controversy in New Orleans these days as to when the cameras need to be turned on. So I would think that much like what you have here when you have an officer-involved shooting and you have a procedure for turning on the cameras on the vehicle, that we would want to have something pretty clearly there if we do go to the cameras, because there is that issue. And also, the other issue that I saw come up was, you know, the various angles that you can have on cameras. When, you know, when we're looking at some of these things, even in the baseball review, one person looks at one camera that Fox Sports has, and then there's a different feed, and the whole scenario can look entirely different depending on what that perspective of the camera is. And I know that that's tangentially related, but it seems to be related to me, that somehow there would be rules about all of that as part of might be incorporated with this use of force.
It is, and thank you for those comments, because I do agree. Whatever systems that we have in place, the policies have to be clear and have to be followed.
Right. The other thing is that it seemed to me, as just someone who was watching the Ferguson situation, is that there was a lot of disturbance about how the respect that the body received following the shooting. And I don't know if there's any policies in here. I know I talked to Jeanette Culpepper, who I know you know very well, and I'm wondering if in these kind of circumstances there ought not to be, or perhaps there is already, some sort of provision about how we provide respect to the body and yet still maintain the scene, which is, you know, a scene of a homicide, essentially.
And if you'd like me to, I absolutely agree with you. And the Metropolitan Police Department and our investigators do what I would describe as the best job in the region about investigating homicide scenes. And I say that because you've all heard the Major Case Squad.
Right.
And we have the largest number of investigators that we contribute to the Major Case Squad, not just because we're the largest, but because our investigators are that good. So I'm very proud of the work that our investigators do, and I'm very proud of our participation in the Major Case Squad. We have spent a lot of time, and I have to commend Mike Sack, who is the commander of the Crimes Against Persons Unit, and John Green, the lieutenant in our Homicide Division, for the job that they do. We know that even an act of violence touches a family in a way that many of us can't comprehend. And so that's why we have alliances with the ministers, the Homicide Ministers Alliance. Many times at the scene of a homicide, members of the clergy are there with us, supporting the family, supporting the officers. Our goal, our desire, is to be done with that scene as quickly as possible. Our homicide detectives are on duty almost 24 hours a day, and we have a very strong call-out process in the middle of the night, in the morning if they are not. We have a great relationship with the medical examiner, who does play a role in this as well. Our evidence technician units are equipped with screens, if you will, for lack of a better word, to minimize the visual, if you will, of a body laying in the street until it can be processed, and quickly processed. Just as a contrast to you brought up Ferguson, and I won't talk about another department, I only talk about our department. We move very quickly. An hour to an hour and a half to process a homicide scene is probably among the best in the country, and that's how quickly we do it in many cases. There may be extenuating circumstances that require longer, But that really is our standard in how quickly we can move through these processes to do a thorough investigation. And I think that's the key that we always have to remember. I think you want, I know I do, a thorough investigation to catch all of the evidence, to catch all of the information that is at the scene, so ultimately we can hold the person responsible who committed that crime. So I'm very proud of our homicide division, the work that they do, and the work that actually all the officers do around securing, preserving, and quickly moving through the homicide scenes.
Thank you for that. I noticed in here, and I was a little surprised by this, that actually warning shots are not permitted under your use of force policy.
It is, and in an urban environment, what goes up has to come down. And so our standard for training officers when they discharge their weapon, we don't do warning shots. It's not like the movies where you do trick shots and you shoot for the knees or you shoot for the hands. We train our officers, and it is a standard, to stop the aggression, to find a way to preserve life as much as they can, but to stop the aggression, to protect those around that are in danger, and to protect themselves. I'll equate it to the CSI effect that the prosecutor sees. Crime scenes and DNA do not come back in 40 minutes with 3 commercial breaks like they do on television. Those investigations take much longer. Police work is not like you see on television. It is not glamorous. It's not glamorous. It's very nitty-gritty sometimes. It's very dirty sometimes. And police officers are human. And so in a situation, if deadly force is authorized, deadly force is authorized. The officer's life is in danger, another citizen's life is in danger, and that's what's necessary. And just to give you an example, many individuals can be shot in the leg and continue to fire their weapon. Many individuals can be shot in the arm, even the head, and the aggression continues. We train officers to stop the aggression.
Right. In the Citizens Academy, even in the scenarios, it can be pretty traumatic, actually. And when you don't know what somebody's reaching for, and you start thinking about a thing of life and death. So I appreciate all that.
And that's you bring up a great point, and I purposely didn't want to go through a long opening statement because I wanted these to come up. We train our officers in shoot and don't shoot scenarios using a variety of techniques, not only live fire at the range, but virtual simulators along with simunitions, which puts an officer in a situation where there is a little bit of pain, if you will, if they're shot with a simunitions round, if they choose or make the wrong decisions. We spend a lot of time in disciplining our officers about trigger control, about shot placement, about a variety of things, about when to shoot and not to shoot. And so those aren't things that are brushed off easily or lightly. And our academy is 6 months. We spend 6 months not only training the officers about constitutional law, about traffic law, about community policing, about defensive tactics, but in those real-life scenarios, or we try to get as close to real-life scenarios as we can, because when we send an officer out on the street, day one, they could face a scenario like that. So we try to do as thorough of a job, and I have to commend the Academy under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Larry O'Toole. He is commander of professional standards. Dan Cole, Lieutenant Cole, is in charge of our academy, and Blake Tucker is the sergeant in charge of our defensive tactics and our firearms. They do a fantastic job.
You know, quite a few years ago, I had a situation, and I know I've had a few since then, but in the situation where you have a mentally challenged person, what it seems to me is most of the times the reason that it's difficult for the police officer is that the police officer doesn't know what they're encountering. I mean, they honestly don't know what's going on. And I know that there's not a 100% way of dealing with that. I'm just, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of, you know, creative ways of trying to reduce that lack of knowledge of what's going on. So what I thought of is something, you know, the mayor has what I call like the reverse 911, or the situation where we know people who, in the event of an emergency, need assistance, and so we can go out there and provide that kind of assistance. You know, without you know, invading people's privacy, because this is a voluntary kind of thing, I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful to kind of look at something like that, so when an officer, you know, obviously if they're going far afield from where this person lives or where they might live. Officers who are in that area have a general idea of certain persons who need to be treated with special care because of the particular situation that they're in. I wonder if there isn't some way of trying to create that.
Well, to answer your question, it would be fantastic if it were that simple. But I think you said when people go far afield and in situations, all we have is a basic description. Man, woman, blue shirt, white shirt, whatever the description may be.
In the situation that I had some years ago, and I'm not even sure if in this one that we had with the knife and so forth, if whether that was related. But in the situation I had, the person was actually at home, and I know that that's happened in another number of circumstances. And that
we do have the ability, and we do have many locations that in our computer-aided dispatching system have the ability to be flagged for a variety of reasons, and there are many that are flagged for that. We can do locations much more simply than we could individuals, but your point's well taken. Again, we start to get mission creep outside of the true responsibility of law enforcement about diagnosing mental illness and tracking mentally ill people.
Thank you.
All right, Alderman Boyd.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Chief Dotson. Normally I have a whole lot of questions, but it seemed like quite a few have been taken up already. But one of the, I think one of the biggest questions is the whole issue about mental illness and police officers having to make split decisions, not really sure what's going on with a subject. You talk about 40 hours of training. Can you, in a minute and a half, kind of describe, what does that training really look like?
Early diagnosis of behaviors that could be indicators of mental illness and de-escalation techniques. How to talk to an individual, keywords, key phrases, resources that are available for that individual. That's really it. So quick diagnosis of behaviors that could be indicators of mental health issues, along with de-escalation techniques, along with the ability to get to service providers for those individuals.
Okay, in the training, is there training given to police officers that deal with suicide by police?
Well, to kind of back up a little bit, suicide by police is not a call that, somebody calls in and says, by the way, I want the police to come and kill me. So every officer has the ability every day to encounter some individual that may have a desire to do that. So that's why the training is across the board. De-escalation. So even when we talk about the use of force continuum and the training we do in the academy, there are de-escalation techniques in there. Mental health training, CIT training, has those de-escalation notes in it as well. The key, simply saying that you want the police to shoot you will not get you shot. And what it will do though is an act of aggression towards the officer or towards someone else will cause an officer to take action under the use of force policy. So simply saying, shoot me, kill me, whatever, is not the trigger. What it is the overt action from the individual.
Okay, you also talked about police officers are not really trained to shoot at the knee, shoot the hand, and so on and so forth. But in certain situations, just from a lay citizen standpoint, it would seem that there are some cases where maybe that makes sense, that if a person's been aggressive and the person doesn't actually have an armed weapon, maybe they have a weapon, it's a bat, it's a whatever it may be, but maybe they don't necessarily have to be shot and killed, but shoot to wound.
And I appreciate that question, and I do. What we train the officers to do is stop the aggression using all of the tools along the force continuum. But if an officer is presented with a deadly force encounter where a subject is using deadly force against the officer or another individual, the officers are authorized to use deadly force. Doesn't mean that they have to, but it certainly is authorized. If they reasonably believe, which is the legal standard, if they reasonably believe that their life is in danger or the life of another person is in danger, they're authorized to do that. And to the example that I used, I believe, with Alderman Schmidt, if a person is armed with a gun or a knife and you shoot for the knee, you miss the knee, and the aggression continues, just on the other side of the equation and somebody innocent is harmed, then the question is, why didn't the police do their job?
Yeah, we could probably have a long conversation dealing with the mental illness, because that's pretty much a real big issue and concern that I have. And so many people out there are suffering from mental illness, and the state of Missouri doesn't seem to really care that much. And, you know, allowing any and everybody to carry weapons seems to be the way to go in the state of Missouri. I'm just really concerned about being authorized to use deadly force when to the, I can't say that. I don't want to second guess anybody, but I'm just thinking there's some situations where you just say something's wrong with this person.
Well, and in those situations, we don't use deadly force. We use a variety of tools, whether it's pepper spray, baton, open hand techniques, taser, all of those. So because you have mental health doesn't mean that we go to the deadly force issue. And I think you touched on it, not to interrupt you, but we have even gone additional steps, and we have mental health caseworkers that are part of a pilot program from the state, for lack of a better word, embedded with us several days a week, that when an officer does encounter an individual on a routine call that does potentially have mental health issues, we have somebody to pass that case off to. I think you touched on it with all of the reductions in mental health services throughout the state. What you're seeing is the men and women in the blue uniforms are becoming the service providers. I don't think you want that. They're not trained for that. They don't want that. What we need to do is find a way to fill that gap. And then to your last point, you've heard me continually say that there are far too many guns, far too much availability to criminals to possess guns in the city and in the state, even to the point where I've challenged the constitutional ballot language. That's how strongly I believe that point.
And certainly my expectation is that police officer can't quickly diagnose someone has a mental illness. I mean, obviously you don't know if the person has a mental illness or not. The person could be certified to have a mental illness, or, you know, temporarily have a mental illness because of depression and all kind of things going on in their life. It's certainly a tough situation, but it's a conversation that I hope we continue to have as far as how do we deal with people who are perceived to have a mental illness, so that, you know.
I would enjoy that conversation all day long, because it is unfair to ask the police officers to be the mental health providers for the city. And I don't mean that in a flip way. What I mean is we're forced to do it, and I think they're better, more qualified to do it.
Thank you. No more questions.
All right. Alderman French?
Thank you. Chief, so one, just in general, this is always a complaint of mine, if you can provide these kind of things before the committee hearing, that'd be helpful. And so I'm going through it. So first, the first part here on page 1, issued September 9th this year.
But just to, can I be clear, this order was in place. The last 3 pieces, Roman numerals 9, 10, and 11, are the new ones that I talked about. So this order, in substance, except for those 3 pieces, was in existence for for a long period of time. The changes in here are those, and the Board of Police Commissioners was still in some places, and it was removed. So the policy is an older policy, the 3 new sections, that's why the date changed.
Okay, so the sections inside dealing with, so section 2 dealing specifically with the use of deadly force, that's been in effect since July 2009.
Well, and it has been in effect, but there have been updates, and it would be a word change, a variety of things, and every time we update the order. So again, I just want to be clear, this policy is continually updated as we try and make it better, as we have instances. As you look at, we've had tactical reviews of cases previously. There may be changes in here for tactics and updates. So again, in effect, this order in substance was the same order that I was trained on when I came through the academy in 1993. But there have been updates since then.
So with the exception of the last 3 sections, all of this was in effect at the time of the Powell shooting.
That's correct, yes, with some minor word changes to take out the Board of Police Commissioners.
Gotcha. So under the use of deadly force, it says that deadly force may be used in the performance of police duty under the following circumstances. Number one being to protect the officer and others from what is reasonably believed to be an immediate threat of death or serious physical harm. And then it goes on, excuse me, this is a big document here. In section 6, which was published in 2008, under the introduction, it says that officers should use the least amount of force necessary to accomplish their lawful objectives while safeguarding their own lives and the lives of others. So specifically with the Powell shooting, do you think that that could have been handled in a way that used a lesser amount of force necessary to accomplish those lawful objectives?
Two things. One, that case is still under investigation, so I will talk about it at a higher level. So let's talk about the use of deadly force. The use of deadly force is authorized when an officer reasonably believes that their life is in danger. In that case, we've already talked about that the standard is that within 21 feet, an edged weapon is considered a deadly weapon. So therefore, the officer is authorized to use the force necessary to overcome the resistance, or to overcome the situation.
So just to be clear, I think, and I agree with you with that interpretation, but there's two questions here, is what is legally allowable and what should have happened. And so were those officers, equipped, those particular officers, were they equipped with tasers?
They were, yes.
All right. So under policy, same policy, under policy 6, under tasers, situations where tasers may be used. This is section E. Under 2, examples of situations where the taser may be considered for use will include but not be limited to A, perceived mentally ill subject who may be violent and pose a threat to officers or others. B, a subject who is armed with some type of lethal weapon, i.e. knife, firearm, but is not posing an immediate threat to the officers, and the taser officer can deploy the taser with a high probability of success. And then it has a note, the officer using the taser must have a backup officer present to provide lethal force if it becomes necessary. So don't you think that that situation, as we saw through the video, kind of applies to this section of the code, that a taser could have been used by the officer closest to Powell, and the second officer could have been there for backup with lethal force if necessary? And
I said that we wouldn't talk specifically about the case. I think when you started reading that section, it said maybe. I think you started out by saying may be used. So certainly it is an option. As we talked about earlier on with Alderman Kennedy about moving through the force continuum, those are steps that are along the way. So you said that a knife is a lethal force encounter, deadly force is authorized. Let's talk about the limitations of a taser. Is a taser 100% effective? No, it is not. Is a firearm 100% effective in stopping aggression? No, it's not. In a situation where a taser is deployed, tasers work on being able to make contact with the skin. So a taser has an effective range of about 7 to 14 or 15 feet? 7 to 15 feet. The prongs, a taser is fired, 2 filaments come out with probes attached to them. Both probes have to make contact with the skin in order for a taser to be effective. The closer that the tasers are to each other, or the prongs are to each other, the less effective a taser is. Tasers are more effective the wider spread. So as a subject is moving towards you with a knife, an edged weapon in this case, and you were to deploy a taser, there's a possibility or a probability that the taser may not work. So we've already said that a suspect, this could be within 21 feet. We've already said that deadly force is authorized. Taser certainly is an option, but again, a subject can close 21 feet before an officer has a chance to respond. That's the reality of the world. Well, you said maybe and authorized and likely and probable. The real world is that a suspect can cover 21 feet before an officer can respond.
Okay, and those are fair points. But looking at the video, the officers could have also stepped back in the vehicle if they thought their lives were in danger.
And again, we're specifics of the case, but certainly
about the specific case, where is that now? Is that is under investigation internally by the police department and the circuit attorney?
I have immediately, and this one, and you were there, Alderman, and I'll be completely forthright in this. The whole time that I was driving to the scene, I was thinking about the things that had happened in Ferguson and how to make sure that the lessons learned in Ferguson were not lessons that were repeated here. Before I even arrived at the scene, before I knew any of the facts at all. So I was very resolved in my mind that I wanted to make sure that we moved through the crime scene as professionally as we could, to share the information publicly as quickly as we could. And so when I got to the scene and I became aware of the facts as I knew them then, we briefed the media, and then I walked into the community, into the neighborhood, to try and be as open and as transparent as I could. Later that night, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, I became aware of the video that existed. I got a copy of the video about 9:30 the following morning. By noon, we'd scheduled a press conference to release that video, so everybody would know the totality that I knew. So I knew what I knew at the scene. I got the video. I knew a little more information. We released that information. I also sent copies of that to the Circuit Attorney's Office and to the U.S. Attorney and the Justice Department, so they would have that as well. So they have all of the information except the investigative report, the police report, which is being finalized, and when it is done, and I know you just got this, so the Force Investigative Unit, our policy now is to share that with the Circuit Attorney's Office in a very clear pattern. So once that is done, it will be shared. But the Circuit Attorney has a copy of the video, the radio transmissions, the 911 call, everything that I released, all three agencies, Circuit Attorney, FBI, U.S. Attorney, had those that day.
So those are 3 investigations going on simultaneously?
You'd have to ask them about their investigations. I can't speak for any of those agencies, but I provided them all of the information in its totality that I knew at the time.
So you can't really say if the FBI is investigating it?
That's a question you'd have to ask the FBI. I cannot answer that.
Or whether the Circuit Attorney is actually investigating it?
I cannot answer that either. What I can tell you is I provided them the information, and when our report is finalized, I will provide that to them as well.
And so this new policy that you have to turn over to the Circuit Attorney information related to lethal force, that's only for lethal force, not non-lethal force?
Right now, what the policy is that this was the officer-involved shooting where an individual and a person is struck by an officer's bullet or by or die in that commission, or any case that I think is necessary. So if there is a situation where I believe that use of force was excessive, was deadly, there's a process in here to investigate it and to send it to the Circuit Attorney's Office. The whole idea behind this, and again, this started much before Ferguson. This started much before our shooting on Riverview. I was very clear that I wanted to be as open and as transparent and as forthcoming for the Metropolitan Police Department as possible. So what will happen is everything that I can legally release, and I'm not mincing words, the only thing that I'm aware that I cannot release are the officers' garrity statements. The statements that they make under the threat of job action will be sent to the Circuit Attorney's Office for their review. That's how thorough, that's how open, that's how transparent I want to be.
Okay. So, so this is not necessarily something new. You remember back in April, and I think the young man's name was Mario Crump. He was a mentally ill man who was at his home, and his wife called the police because he was acting erratic. And next thing you know, there was a video that surfaced that showed police punching him in his chair as he laid in his house, punching him in his face and his upper body. So that would fall under the use of non-deadly force. And in your description here again, it says, the non-deadly force includes the use of defensive tactics, punches, kicks, as well as offensive, blah, blah, blah. Officers may use non-deadly force for the resolution of incidents as follows: to protect themselves and others from physical harm, to restrain or subdue a resistant individual, or to bring any unlawful situation safely and effectively under control. It also says is that the department recognizes that in exceptional circumstances, violation of this restriction may be justified by necessity. Such violations will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis to be determined the reasonableness of the officer's actions. Who reviews those?
Right now, there's the Internal Affairs Division, which conducts an investigation, interviews the witnesses, the caller, the victim, whomever is available, interviews the officers, and then makes a recommendation to me about the case.
And then you decide what?
Yes. What I will do is if department policies or rules were violated, if there were, in cases, the need for a criminal investigation, those types of things, and then make sure those processes are followed.
So presently, that is completely internal to your department?
For those types of complaints, yes. Use of force, deadly force now will go to the circuit attorney's office.
Okay. And so what happened in this case?
The Mario Crump case?
Yeah.
Is that what we're referring to? I haven't seen the final report for that. I have not seen the final report for that. So I am in a situation where I can't answer it. It's still under investigation.
So, I mean, there was, obviously there wasn't national attention, but there was a lot of attention on it. And I remember in the articles I'm reading here, you were quoted as saying that those 2 officers that were involved actually had completed the crisis intervention training. But that's not how we would want mentally ill people to be subdued, and especially when their wives are calling for help. He wasn't violent.
Well, when the wives were calling for help to have their husband removed from the home. So
because he was acting erratically, not because he was violent.
So I don't want to get into the specifics of that case, but again, you go to, as I mentioned to Alderman Kennedy, what the officers knew at the time of the call. So again, it's easy for us, for me, for you, for anyone, to stand, several months later in a Monday morning quarterback position and say, gee, if I did that, I would act this way, when we have a bigger picture. So it's still under investigation. There have been no final recommendations on that case. I will tell you, though, I did out of that sit down with mental health providers from around the region, talk about our CIT training. We've made some improvements to our CIT training that have come out of that. That kind of goes to your point about the policy here. We do critical incident reviews, we look at cases, and we make recommendations about how to be better. Sometimes I wish things didn't happen the way that they did, but we always find opportunities to try and train to a higher standard, give our officers more information, give our officers better tools.
Alderman, it's time to move to the next alderman.
Can I ask one last question?
One more question.
So you mentioned big picture, and I agree with you. And the big picture I see it is that there are very few citizens that we give the power to kill other human beings with. That is a power that we give as a society and as a power that we can limit. And we have given the police officers a great deal of leeway. And if at some point, and I think that point is here, if we feel that they are not exercising that responsibly, that there are instances in which other means could have been used and a human life did not have to be taken, then I think it is our responsibility to review whether we want to give you guys that power.
And I appreciate that. I think when you talk about you guys, I think you also have to include the conversation about the United States Constitution. Many of these deadly force cases from around the country have been taken to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's where we've got this reasonableness standard. The Second Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment give officers certain protections as well as they do citizens. And so I think I agree when the broader conversation needs to happen, but when you talk about you guys, it's not the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis. It's not the state legislature in the state of Missouri. It is actually a broader conversation that needs to happen. Conversely, to take it from the other side.
So you don't believe that the city of St. Louis Board of Aldermen can limit the use of lethal force within the city of St. Louis?
I think that there are legal standards that have been tested up to the United States Constitution, the Supreme Court, that set some of those that the Board of Aldermen, I don't know what you have in mind, but what may come in conflict with some of the decisions that the Supreme Court has made about reasonableness and about a police officer's ability to protect themselves. And so, and that's where I was really going to go with this. The flip side of that conversation is that we ask police officers to do a dangerous job. You ask police officers to do a dangerous job. We have to make sure that we give them the tools they need to do their job, including training, de-escalation skills, all of those. But we also have to remember that they do, as a citizen does, have a right to defend themselves. So I think the conversation needs to be had, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but if we're talking about bigger picture, there are issues that have been tested all the way up to the United States Supreme Court that need to be baked into this conversation to be fair to both sides. And that's really what we want. We want to be fair to the citizenry of the city of St. Louis. We need to be fair to the police officers that we ask to do the job as well.
All right, Alderman Vaccaro.
I guess I have more just of a statement, and I've said it before. My son's a homicide detective in the city of St. Louis, and he's come across so many young people that have been killed, a lot of innocent people, a grandma not that long back that was killed protecting her grandkids. We've done fundraisers for police officers like Norvell Brown, who was trying to get out and was doing a stop and felt, I don't know what he felt, but he got shot and killed for no particular reason. I feel bad for Mike Brown, and I feel bad for the Powells and everybody that's getting killed out there. As a community, we either need to start working together to stop it. We can't put it solely on the police. It's our responsibility as neighbors and as a neighborhood to report these things. The Board of Aldermen, the police department only have a certain amount of power. And I know I've seen my son, who's a big guy, 6'7", I've seen him cry because of this stuff. And it's time that we raise up like you want to do now against crime, period. We got to stop the killing in the city of St. Louis. I hope you all pray for these poor people. I hope you pray for the families of Norvell Brown as well as Michael Brown and the Powells. I do have a question for Director Gray. Director Gray, I sit on public safety as well as Ways and Means. I've talked to the alderman. You said that you've talked to aldermen about the cameras. Why was I excluded?
Just in the hallways as we were walking through. There's been no set meetings with them.
Well, there's going to be a meeting Tuesday about a way to provide the money for the cameras.
I was asked by Alderman Kennedy to be at that meeting this week.
Well, I would, but when you sit there and you make a general statement that you've talked to the alderman, I'm just disappointed I haven't been talking to.
My door has been open, and you know
No.
my door is open, so.
No, you made a statement that you talked to the alderman.
In passing.
Okay.
Okay. Can I answer the question that you asked?
Sure.
Okay. You asked the question. I've met with Alderman Kennedy, and I met with Alderman French. They have come by my office, and we've chatted about about cameras in my conversations with them.
Is that true? Because I asked you.
Yeah.
You mentioned cameras, but
Yeah.
Because I had asked, and, you know, I happened to because I asked the two aldermen sitting next to me if they'd been talked to, and I was told no. So, anyway, I would appreciate it not being excluded.
No problem.
And again, I would just ask everybody to put all these people in your prayers, work together. Let's stop crime in the city of St. Louis, period. And I hope you are incensed the same about all the grandmas and the little kids trying to use their computer at home. I can't see the sign. You'll have to tell me or get closer. 12 shots to do what?
All right,
12 shots
let's
and
make sure that we're talking here.
Okay. And what I'm saying is, it even takes less than that with all the killings that are going on. We need to, as a community, we need to stop. We need to stop the killing amongst each other, too.
Okay, do you have further questions?
No, that was a statement.
Okay. Alderman Arnowitz?
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Good morning, Chief. How are you?
Good morning, how are you?
Good. I want to thank you for taking time out to come down. First thing is, I appreciate you bringing this in, but I got to have this in plenty of time to digest 34 pages. I understand trying to talk on the difference of deadly force, what's considered deadly force, when you should use it, you know, shouldn't you use a taser, shouldn't you use other weapons before? And it seems like the general consensus is always asking, basically, sounds like they don't want a police officer to shoot. So they want everybody to try to use everything else first. and I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, but how many people has been put in that situation where they think their life is posed as a threat or someone come up on them? It's very scary. You know, it happened to my wife on attempted carjacking. So I guess if she pulls her pistol out and shoots him, you know, I don't know, did she do the right thing? I will tell you this, my wife has applied and does carry a pistol now since that incident because it did scare her. It's a tough job being a police officer, and unless you've really been in that situation, you know, you make a split-second decision that's going to affect the rest of your life. I've seen people on PCP come after a police officer and they've shot him 5 or 6 times, slow him, and they keep coming. I've seen, in fact, when I was a marshal, mace someone for a couple minutes in the eyes. All he did was wipe his eyes, looked at me, and took off running. If he'd have grabbed me, he probably would have whipped my behind because he was way bigger than me. It's just different situations, and I think people, you know, automatically jump ahead on judgment on a lot of things. You know, I mean, 24 hours later, you can sit back and think, could you have done this? Could you have done that? Well, I think the same thing on Mondays after my fantasy football team loses. We can all come back and double guess. I mean, it's a terrible situation. It really is. Do police sometimes overreact? I'll say yes. There are police officers that overreact. There is good police officers out there, but it's like everywhere else. You have bad police officers. We need to root them out. We need the good police officers to step up and get them out. You know, I'm not a police officer, but I've seen a lot of things, and it goes both ways. I think the bottom line is you can get all the training you want, but when it comes to making a decision that involves your life or someone else, you know, I don't want to be the one to judge it. Tasers, you talked about the effectiveness of it, and the prongs being close. You know, maybe the last incident, I don't know. I don't know how far away the gentleman was. He was running. I mean, maybe they could have tried to tase him. Maybe they could have tried to shoot him in the legs. And I think police officers are trained. You're trained to stop the threat. You shoot to stop the threat. Isn't everything on training is pointed to center mass? You know, and let's be honest, all police officers aren't a straight shot. So I think that's why they're trained to shoot at center mass, because you actually don't know where you're going to go. I agree, it's not like TV when you're shooting. More training. My other question is, when police get called to a situation, as the Alderman French alluded to, Mario Crump, whose wife called, and I always say this question, and sometimes I think the family or friends don't realize it at the time. When you call and someone's mentally ill, causing disturbance, and they're out of hand, do they say that on the phone when they make the 911 call? Or do the police know ahead of time getting there, you know, we have a person that's mentally ill, has issues, you know, I just want to let you know ahead of time. But I think in a panic, a lot of that's forgotten. And then when you go in there and you don't know, or they don't say right away, and you are trying to subdue someone, you know, it makes it a little hard, I think.
So to answer that point, sometimes yes, sometimes no. We do spend time training our dispatchers about how to help callers when it sounds like there's mental health issues, to try and draw that information out. But again, you have to understand that a lot of times people just describe a behavior that may include mental health issues, may not, may include alcohol, may include drugs, may include a variety of things. Still, the individual is impaired. But we do offer a block of instruction to our dispatchers to try and help them while they're on the phone, try to draw that information out. And then as much as we can, everything we can, we try and transfer the officer to the officers responding to the call so they have the best possible picture they can. But again, sometimes officers walk into a situation where they don't have that, or they walk into a situation without a 911 call where they observe something happening and again are put into a situation. And I think that's why the standard is reasonableness and what the officers knew at the time when courts, if you will, go back and evaluate the use of deadly force. That's the standard that's set, reasonableness in what the officers knew at the time.
Yeah, you know, and it goes a long ways. You know, we got people locked up that has mental health, has mental issues, and we need to get them out of there and get them to the right place and get them help, because being locked up in the jail surely doesn't help them and help them get any better. But I mean, I understand the public outcry out there, and I think they have a good reason to. You know, things are just getting out of hand so bad, it seems like, instead of everybody wanting to get together and try to work together. Just one last question. Even though the police department is actually under city control, so when these meetings go on about different things in the police department, is it just meetings with the mayor? Because I would think that the Board of Aldermen would be included in some meetings, or this committee, on different things if you want to make changes or do things in the city.
And certainly, a couple of things. We do take public feedback in a variety of ways. This is a great, and I've said this, I've never said that I don't look forward to coming to see you, because I enjoy coming to this committee, believe it or not. And when we have public meetings in our area stations, each district has almost a monthly meeting. We take public feedback. When we meet internally, we look at policies and procedures, and when we meet, it's with the public safety director, it's with specific aldermen who have an issue, it's with a variety of people. So we get to better policies through a variety of ways. There's not one clear path. Just an example, the Force Investigative Unit is something that I was very passionate about. We got to that through meetings with the legal department in the city, with the Police Officers Association, with various unions. So they come through a variety of paths. So if there's something that you're interested in, I think that's probably a better way. Let us know about it. Our policies and procedures are 3 phone books thick. So if there's something you're interested in, I'll share the policy with you and we can talk about ways to potentially improve it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Alderwoman Hubbard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Chief Dotson, for coming. At this point, we've asked so many questions, so I guess I'll just probably make some comments. I know that you spoke of deadly force. You spoke of how deadly force could be escalated. You educated us some on the use of force continuum. Clearly, I have some knowledge of that. And you also reached out and said that, you know, you've been dealing with David Klinger, and I just want to expound on that. You all have some of the best criminologists in the nation right here at UMSL, so I think it's good that we use them to move forward. But in regards to deadly force and what the standard is, I think our move going forward should not be to simply say legally we can operate within this framework. I think that, you know, we should be held to a higher standard. I don't think we should say, okay, well, if it was within 21 feet, then, okay, we were justified. I think the community is counting on us to be better trained and to make better decisions. As this body, we definitely are holding the police department to a higher standard. And as the chief, and I know you are more than capable of doing this job, I just think we need to revisit exactly what we're doing and how we move forward. I mean, we have some issues going on here in our city. You know, we were under a microscope. Everyone's looking at it. I'm just so glad the uproar didn't happen in the city of St. Louis, because it would have been 10 times what Ferguson was. And so going forward, we just need to have some real conversations, talk about some real resolution, and just try to, you know, get some things going and, you know, not get stuck, because we have a hotbed and some things can really get serious really fast. So as a police department, we just expect you all to go above and beyond, you know, the policy and everything, just to try to quell this situation and make sure things are better.
And I appreciate those comments, and we do rely on UMSL a tremendous amount. Rick Rosenfeld, David Klinger, Dan Isom, a variety of well-knowledged, well-experienced people there. I just want to be clear on just a little bit of things. the use of deadly force, because it's authorized, doesn't mean it's an automatic go-to. And so we talk about escalation and de-escalation, and so I think that's just, it's an interesting concept to explain. Just because it's authorized, we don't necessarily go there. We handle over 300,000 calls a year in the city of St. Louis. Most of them go without rising to any of our levels. That it happens day in and day out, and that's what we do. When instances like Kajami Paul or Michael Brown or whomever come to our attention, I think these conversations are very good, and I think we absolutely have to have them, and have them out in the light of day and open like this. But I think we also have to look at it from all sides of the equation. I think you are, I'm not saying that you're not. What's right for the community, what's right for the officers, what's realistic, what's reasonable, and we also have to talk about what we can do. Let's talk about violence in the city of St. Louis. As you've heard me talk about many a times about an armed offender docket in the circuit court. Hey, those are things that we all, as a body, as a city, should be pushing for, because anything that we can do to reduce the level of violence in the city keeps our community safer, keeps our officers safer, and reduces the possibility or probability that we might run into these encounters. And 6 deadly use of force encounters this year, it's 6 too many, but it's fewer than we've had in previous years.
Alderman Carter.
Good afternoon, Chief. Good morning.
Yeah. It'll be afternoon soon.
Yeah, I know. So much stuff was asked. I don't know if we touched some of my questions, but if we have, just mention that we have and try to re-hit it. But the first point that I wanted to make was body cams, and I didn't know if it was you or Director Gray who should be on record for this. So body cams work in similar cities like ours, like Baltimore City, for one. But the only reason that it does work there because they have a civilian review board set up that reviews each situation that happens on those cameras. So would that be something that you would want to support or be behind?
I answered that earlier. I did tell the board that I was in charge of it. We've been working on a civilian review oversight board since April, and we'll continue to work with Alderman Kennedy to get that accomplished.
Okay. So do we already have an avenue of funding for the proposed body cams that you are proposing? Because that's something that I think is going to be key in moving forward.
I think that's next week's meeting, right?
That's next week's meeting.
Oh, to talk about where to pull the money from.
Absolutely.
Okay. Back to the chief. Thank you. So, Chief, how often does the police department change out its mace and or tasers? I don't know if you have to change out tasers, right?
No, tasers no. Mace, I'm looking at a life expectancy of a canister of mace. 5-year shelf life. So
how much have we spent in the last 5 years on tasers and or mace? And if you don't know, just that'll be something
just to give you a cost. An individual taser cost.
No, I mean overall for the whole department.
I'm just.
I would say, sir, in the upwards of $300,000 for tasers.
So, and that's not a taser for every officer, but what it is a taser for every car that is out there. So every officer is not equipped with a taser, but every car that we deploy out on the street has at least one taser with it. That's our policy, that each car will have at least one taser in it every day.
That's the new policy, or is that part of the old?
It's been in effect. It's been in effect for, I put it in effect, so in the last 18 months, but it's been in effect for before August.
Okay, and I know that you can't talk about the Riverview case, but so they had a taser in the car with them, and I'm not sure if...
That's correct, they did,
okay.
Yes. It was actually, to be clear, I believe it was on their person. It wasn't situated in the car, it was on their person, but I believe they did have a taser.
Oh, okay. And I'm gonna just shoot around all of my questions. In those type of situations, how many times does the officers have to be evaluated before they actually come back?
In a situation where an officer fires their gun?
And actually kill someone?
Each officer in a officer-involved shooting is evaluated by a psychiatrist before they are put back to work. and the doctor makes an evaluation if they're able to go back to work. So in every case that an officer discharges his weapon or her weapon and strikes a suspect.
Okay, how often are regular officers on the street evaluated?
Our hiring process has a psychological evaluation as a component of it. After that, it's on if an officer would exhibit some characteristics that would require, would be a trigger to believe that a supervisor should have them reviewed, but there is not an ongoing psychological evaluation for officers.
Okay. And I don't even know if this is the proper meeting to ask this, but how much did we spend in sending officers, in terms of overtime, out to Ferguson to help out in that situation?
The whole Ferguson conversation with equipment were about $1 million. And so that's, but to be clear, that includes additional patrols inside the city of St. Louis. As you know, early on, the first week of Ferguson, there were several locations that were window smashing individuals. So we deployed our resources, and a lot of it was on overtime. So that is a combination of 12-hour days, additional resources. There were a couple of days that we canceled days off. So that's not the number of people that we sent to Ferguson, but because of Ferguson, that's what the Metropolitan Police Department spent inside the city and supporting that.
And not meaning to cut you off, but there is a special code for different police departments, and when that code is called, you have to come, right?
Mutual aid is a pact that law enforcement has around the region to support each other. We are, on this side of the state, the largest agency, therefore we have the biggest resources, therefore we are called more frequently, yes.
So we won't be reimbursed federally, or we won't get any help from any other agency in terms of funding?
In this case, there is a conversation going on with the State Department of Public Safety about the cost that the city of St. Louis incurred because of Ferguson, whether in Ferguson or locally in the city of St. Louis. And we are pursuing reimbursement for the equipment and the overtime. And that $1 million is equipment and overtime. So we are pursuing it. I don't have an answer yet, but that conversation is happening in Jefferson City right now.
Okay, so what do you think? Do you think that it's going to go and we're going to get $1.2 million back or whatever we spent?
If you're asking me, I think we should be reimbursed just as
I think we should too.
I agree. So that's my efforts will be to make sure that the city of St. Louis is made whole because of this. I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict, but that's my desire.
So if it's not paid, where will that money come from to pay that?
Well, and like everything, we are part of the city, and so we have to work on our budget in its totality. It will come from additional appropriations. It will come from reduction in vehicles, reduction in officer. It'll have to come from somewhere. So we are in the conversation. We're very early in the conversation. We still have some events to get through before we have the final picture of what has happened. Then we can have that conversation.
Okay.
But we are discussing it right now at the state level and internally, and I don't have the answers yet because we're not done.
Okay, so for Director Gray, I believe that if we can find money to send extra officers out to Ferguson to help out in that situation, we can definitely find money for body cams. Do you agree?
I think if we have to find money for body cams.
Okay. Is there any diversity training for officers? I know they have different types of training, but diversity, because what I see, and I can only speak for the ward that I represent, you have a lot of officers that don't come from, the area that they serve and protect, and so they don't know how to deal with the people that they are called out to handle in a sense. So is there any type of specialty training for that?
There is, yes. We send officers through diversity training, but it's something that we're in the process of developing right now. I met with Judge David Mason at the juvenile courts, and we've talked about implicit bias policing, and we are in the process of command training at the highest ranks about implicit bias policing to try and see what the best course is to push that throughout officers. But to answer your question directly, we do train on diversity. We do quite a bit of training on diversity in the academy and outside of the academy, along with racial profiling issues. So yes, can we do more? Yes. Are we working on it? Yes. Have I met with Judge Mason? Yes. And will you see that in the Metropolitan Police Department in the next 30 to 60 days? Yes.
Thanks. Who made the decision to send the officers out in Ferguson? Was that something that you decided? Was that you and the mayor? Was it different aldermen?
It was a conversation, and again, we go to the Mutual Aid Pact. The request came to me initially from Chief Belmer in St. Louis County for assistance on Sunday. I did have conversations with the Public Safety Director and with the Mayor's office about it, and after that, decisions were made to send officers to Ferguson. We sent officers on Monday and Tuesday. We did not send officers on Wednesday. I'm just going backing up. We sent officers on Sunday and Monday, and then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we did not send officers. Thursday, the Highway Patrol was put in charge by the governor. We did not send officers on Thursday, and then on...
Well, no. I'm just asking who made the decision.
It was a combination. The request came from John Belmer in St. Louis County and in conversations with the Public Safety Director in the Mayor's office.
So, Director Gray?
Yeah.
You made the decision?
I was part of the decision.
Who, right, but I'm trying to get an answer. Who made the decision to send the officers out to Ferguson?
Yeah.
I'm confused. It looks like you are too.
We have.
Excuse me, we're here and we're trying to learn, and so I ask you to be respectful of the people who are making conversations here.
We sat down Sunday night, I would say probably starting at about 9 o'clock until about maybe 11 or so, myself, the mayor, and the chief. And together, based on the code that was called, the decision was made to send our officers out there at that point. So together, it was not a separate done by one person, it was a group decision.
Thanks. Chief, what would be the, is there any procedure on that? No, there isn't.
And
to assist and aid other municipalities that may need help. How much time do I have?
You are about at your last question.
Can I ask one more after this one?
Yeah.
So I think we have a mutual aid agreement, and the major case squad, which I talked about, is an example of that mutual aid agreement that we have with other agencies. And so typically it's the chief. Typically I do it. I'll give you an example. There was a protest in Clayton that came out of this. The Clayton Police Department asked for assistance. We sent 10 officers to assist the Clayton Police Department. So chiefs, including myself, regularly talk about and share resources. It's no different than us writing MetroLink together with St. Louis County. Our bomb and arson units work together. We fly a helicopter together. We work the terrorism task force together. We share resources quite often and very frequently.
And that's similar to what the fire department has in mutual aid as well, right?
It is, yes. Yes, and they use it probably more than we do, yes.
Okay.
Can I make one more point?
You asked for one more question, and I think you did that.
Oh, no, that wasn't my last one. I had one more. And so, Chief, this is mainly a comment. So, with the Riverview situation, and let me say this, it's one thing that I don't like. I don't like when I feel like I'm being used. And in a point at the Riverview situation, you remember our conversation there, right?
I do.
Mine, yours, and French's.
I think I do.
And so the issue that I have is that you seem that could easily turn into a rough situation. So when myself and Alderman French were briefed on the whole situation, you told us both that this isn't the same situation as Ferguson. The guy was 46. The guy had a steak knife, and he was 3 feet away. After I seen that video, and after we found out something else, the guy was 22 or 23. It was clear on the video he was 7+ feet away, and I'm just giving that to you. I can easily say 10 because I believe it was 10 feet, and that it was a whole nother situation basically. And I believed that you did that because you knew that we would calm that crowd. And so my whole perception of you has changed in a sense, because I believe that we were duped into calming that crowd. Alderman French, do you feel the same? Because I mean, you said specifically, you gave points, and we went to the crowd and we calmed them. And you know, if we wouldn't have did that, it would have turned a whole nother way. And so the issue is that I think that you owe us a huge apology, because I feel like we were used.
First, I appreciate your comments, and I'm sorry you feel that way. Absolutely 100%, I disagree with everything you just said. What I knew at the time was what you knew. And so I told you everything that was told to me. So I'll use an analogy that I think somebody else used. If you look at a football game and you have instant replay, what the call on the field was is reversed. So using the standard, what I knew at the time was what I told you at the time. So I'm actually offended by the fact that you think that I would lie to you or use you. The other piece is, I think we all had a responsibility to try and make sure that we kept calm in our community. So I think that is really, to say that if the situation would have been different, you would have stirred up the crowd.
No, but the difference is that this is not a football game. This is real life.
But the point is, I told you.
Excuse me, we need respect. I've asked you for respect, and this is a conversation going on. You're welcome to listen to it, but please don't interject your feelings there.
I cannot change the facts that I knew at the time and make them something that we're not. So this is what we're talking about, armchair quarterback and Monday morning quarterback. As soon as I found out that there was something different, as soon as I had the video, I went out and told the story as I knew it then. So if you've had any experiences through life, when you find out something may not be completely the way, you go out and correct it. That's exactly what I did. At no point did I use you or Alderman French. What I did is told two elected officials what I knew at the time that was told to me by the witnesses that saw the incident. So we talked about perspective, somebody talked about perspective, standing in one place and seeing something different. As soon as I had new information, I put it out. So I'm sorry you feel that way, completely not true.
All right, we'll move on to Alderwoman Ingracia.
Madam Chair, haven't been mentioned in that last thing. Can I make a comment?
I think we'll hold comments until the other aldermen have had the opportunity to ask questions and make comments themselves. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think most of the questions I have been covered. One thing I do want to say, Chief, is I do have a great amount of respect for the police officers that I work with every day. I could not have positive outcomes in my neighborhood without a really helpful partnership with the officers I work with. I want to thank you for placing Lieutenant Dace and Clinton Peabody. I think, you know, underlying all of these issues is a lack of trust between the police department and residents sometimes, and we're breaking down those barriers in Clinton Peabody every day. I guess I'd just like to echo very quickly, you know, a need for racial sensitivity, diversity training, a conversation about a civilian review board, and that's all I have right now. Thanks.
All right. I've been watching the aldermen come into the room, and so we'll go by the basis of when they showed up. Alderman Cruson was here. I don't know if she's been able to stay or whether she has questions.
Oh, she's right there.
If so, want to come up and grab a mic?
Chief, thank you for being here this morning.
Excuse me, will you pull that mic down because it's being filmed?
Chief, thank you for being here this morning and for answering all the questions that the aldermen and later the public have. I appreciate the information that you passed out this morning. I am glad that I don't have to make that decision myself day in and day out. And I appreciate the officers who are in that situation. I also, of course, the situation in Ferguson for Michael Brown is a heartbreaking situation. The situation on Riverview is a heartbreaking situation. And I guess we'll have to wait and find out what the results of those investigations are. And I don't have any further questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Villa.
I have no questions, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Alderman Ortman came in, but then he went out. Is he still here? All right. Alderwoman Behringer.
I have no questions, Madam Chairman, but I appreciate it.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, I want to make a point, since people keep making this point to me, and I'm probably the only person here who actually has been able to subpoena police. I was a defense attorney, so I've done defense work. I mean, I got to send subpoenas, and I actually got to put the police up on the witness stand and ask questions. Some of your senior police officers know me from my days as a public defender. I know the alderman from the 12th, when he was the sheriff when I was the public defender. I heard an alderman make a statement, and I've heard other people make it, and I want to clarify the difference. People say, well, other people are killing kids. Kids are killing kids. Black people are killing black people. Somebody killed a police officer. The African American community does not condone that. And it is, we've been fighting against it way before you were the police chief, and it is nothing that we think that it's okay. We called the police on those children, okay? It was very hard for me when I went to the public defender's office because my family is military and police. So my friends all laughed when I went to the public defender's office because I'm prosecutorial. I didn't jaywalk until I moved to St. Louis, Missouri. That's how police I am. I grew up down the street from the police station. I grew up playing with police kids. So for people to put that out there as though we condone it, we don't. The other thing is that it's not the same. I want you to know that. When the individuals shoot and kill each other, it is not the same as the police. That's different. That is a state-sanctioned shooting, okay? So that is different, and that is why we question it and we demand answers, because now we are something, we are part of it. When I okay and I vote for things to happen, and then something like this happens, I'm part of that. I also want to say that I disagree with the people who say I don't want a second and third and fourth guess you. I want a fifth, sixth, and seventh guess you, okay? I want to ask you questions because I am so prosecutorial, and I do believe in the rules, and I believe in fairness, that how I feel right now is scary to me. I don't like guns. Everybody in my family, my sister, 23 years in the military, they all like guns. They play with them. When I used to try cases, I would pick up the guns like this because I just don't like them. I don't want them. I wish we didn't have them. When I see what I call murders happening and the sadness that I feel in my heart, Michael Brown's auntie is one of my tenants. I had to take her to his mother's house. I've had to help her the way I could behind the scenes. I wasn't one of the politicians. I spoke once, but I've been behind the scenes. And so when I see what I believe is, I think it's murder. Okay, I'm just telling you that. I think that it is a rush to kill, that it is, and it starts from the top. I heard you say something, so I want to ask you this question because when I heard you say it, it sent chills down my spine. I heard you say, and I'm hoping that I heard it wrong. I heard you say in one of the interviews that in the end, the whole thing is to get the police to come home safe. Is that what you said, something like that?
What I said is, and I'll not remember the exact quote, but I think we have to make a promise to our officers that at the end of the day, they get to go home if they do their job morally, ethically, and legally.
But I didn't hear that.
No,
excuse me. Please, you guys, I got this, okay? So please, I got this. You all know me, I got this. So if you didn't hear Alderwoman from the 7th, hear it from me. You know who I am, okay? So just let me ask my questions and let him answer.
And that is a good question and clarification. They have to do their job morally, ethically, and legally to go home. And I agree with you when you talk about the African American community. We talk about individual crimes, individuals committing crime. We talk about individuals as police officers. So I agree with you on both counts. It's individuals, it's not African American community, the white community, it's individuals that commit crime, and that police officers we have to promise they go home at the end of the day if they do their job legally, morally, and ethically.
What I wanted to hear you say is at the end of the day, I want the police officers and the citizens to go home. See, I think you leave out a very big thing. And I call the police, I work with the police, I know them all, I'll call on them in a minute. In fact, I also will approach young children walking in the street, but I handle it differently. If that was Michael Brown, I would say, sweetheart, why are you walking in the street like that? That's what I say to them. And then I'll say, sweetie, do you see that nice new sidewalk we had right there? We put that there so that you can walk on it. Now, mostly they would get on the sidewalk. Once in a while, I would get cussed out. When I get cussed out, usually their friends will say to them, man, that lady didn't talk to you like that, and they check them. So what I'm looking for is, if you're talking about community policing, I want you to say at the end of the day, I want the citizens and the police to go home. Because when I hear you say, I want the police to go home, you sound like an occupying force to me rather than police officers who are here to protect the citizens. My own sister, who I said been in the military for 20-something years, she was getting ready to go to war when she first had her child, who is now 27 years old. I was upset. I was like, oh no, how can you do that? You just had it. I was just upset. She said, no, that's my job. I have to do that. She had just had her baby a few months ago. She had an out because she had just had a baby. But that was her job. And what she did not say, I'm going overseas, because where she was going to shoot the people that I defend, I'm going overseas and put my life at risk to defend the people. So I don't hear from the police that community policing that you talk about. What I hear is an occupying force. And so now I don't want to call the police, because I don't want you to come on Marketplace and shoot Sterling Miller. That's my husband. Because if you do that, I'm just telling you, I don't know that I have the wherewithal not to be out there looking for revenge, okay? I want to say that I saw what happened on Riverview. I'm seeing Chris and Antonio, but I saw Big Chris say, I got this, I'm from here. Big Chris being Chris's father. I saw them calm that down, something you can't do. That comes from from living in a community and people knowing that you love them, not that you won't turn them into police, not that you won't discipline them, not that you don't want them to follow the law, but that you love them and that whatever you do comes from a love and a care about community, not occupying my community, okay? So I don't hear from you a care from my community, and I have dealt with a lot of police chiefs, and I was the chair of public safety, but what I hear from you is an arrogance that you think that it's all right, and that you think, okay, I can just say anything. I would prefer you not to have told Antonio French or Alderman Carter or Alderman French anything, and then wait, take a minute and wait and find out the facts. Because when you hurry up and tell what you think are the facts, and I know people will pressure you, get out there, it's better to say, let me find all the facts out, then I can get back to you. Because it's not good once you tell people one thing, because you can only make a first impression the first time. And so now I hear the alderman saying, well, I have a different outlook on you, when maybe if you had just taken your time and said, I don't know all the facts, I still am glad they calmed the crowd down, okay? Even though you told them the wrong facts, I'm glad the crowd was calmed down. But my suggestion to you is, don't let people push you into saying stuff when you don't know all the facts. Or make sure that you say, these are the facts as I know them now, they may change. Because I dealt with many police chief. Ron Houston was famous, and I know you're not him, for saying, no, I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know all the facts. And I would call him up all the time and say, that's right, Ron, that's right. Okay, because you don't know all the facts. And it was too close to what happened for you to know enough, okay? So that's what I want to say. The other thing, I have a question. You said that the circuit attorney is who reviews deadly force?
Yes, we're sending the cases to the circuit attorney's office.
And do the police do the investigation for the circuit attorneys when there are crimes that are committed?
Yes.
So what we have here, I told you I got this. You all not letting me have it, okay? All right. So this is not my first time, so I'm going to say I've always pushed, then that's a conflict of interest. And I particularly know it's a conflict of interest because they're investigating, but you do the investigation for them. When George Peach was the circuit attorney and I was a young public defender, George Peach talked about one time bringing some charges against the police. The police got blue flu. From then on, I knew it is a conflict of interest for you to be investigated by the very person that you do investigations for. I have, and I'm going to put this out here now, and I'm going to see if you or Mr. Gray would agree that perhaps that we ought to have something set up like we do with the Public Defender's Office. With the Public Defender's Office, when you have two defendants from the same crime, they have a complete separate Public Defender's Office that is not, it's called a special, so that you don't have a conflict of interest. Would you be agreeable that instead of a prosecutor who you investigate the cases with, if we would then have a special prosecutor that investigated police cases? And I'm asking you that and Mr. Gray that.
So we're currently looking at policies and practices that may include that. So certainly it is a conversation that's going on. I also want to point out that in this case and the most recent that I can remember, fatal police shooting, I sent that case to the U.S. Attorney and to the FBI to ask for a new set of eyes to look at it. So I do, in principle, agree with your point, and I think it would be kind of a little bit of a disservice if we didn't bring out that I did send cases, including this one, to the Circuit Attorney, the U.S. Attorney, and the FBI.
Well, I don't want to do you a disservice. I'm glad that you said that, because I think that should happen. That should be just something set up, because just on its face, it's not fair. Because if I'm the circuit attorney and I count on the police to do my investigation, I'm not going to want to make you all mad, because I do believe that there are people that need to be prosecuted. So let me get straight, okay? So I don't want to make the police mad because I prosecuted one of their own. Because whether we like to say it or not, there is a brotherhood. It's among politicians, it's among police, it's amongst everybody. So I think we need to clean that up, and that's been one of the pushes I've done for 20 years. It's not anything new. You talked about the use of force, excessive force.
Alderwoman, last question.
Okay. How many times have you reported in the last 18 months you've been, how many times have you ever reported excessive, how many times have excessive force been reported in the last 2 years?
You mean to Internal Affairs?
Yes.
I'll have to get that number. I did not bring it, but I can provide that to the Alderwoman as soon as I get back to the office.
And when you talk about excessive force, does that mean guns? Could it mean that they just beat up? What does excessive force mean? I need also the definition of what that is.
We track complaints that are taken by our Internal Affairs Division, and we publish them in our annual report. So historically, you can go back. I will get you the numbers. I can give you a list of all the complaints that were taken from Internal Affairs, whether it's use of excessive force, verbal abuse, physical abuse, whatever the case may be. We track them by category like that. So I can provide you for 13 and 14 that information up to year to date this afternoon.
So are you saying then excessive?
Last question.
Okay, but this is still part of my, I'm trying to get an understanding.
But I'm saying questions are going on for a long period of time.
Not really. I got 10 years of being redistricted and gerrymandered. You know all about that, Madam Chairwoman. So I'm going to finish my question, which is, are you defining that, are you telling me that excessive force can be different in different cases? Is that what you're saying?
It is. There may be a case where somebody says that we used excessive force in handcuffing. We used excessive force in facilitating arrest and overcoming or resisting. So excessive force can mean more than just deadly force.
And then you have those statistics that you can get to the members of the Board of Aldermen?
I will, yes. We have them. I can get them this afternoon, first thing in the morning. Yes, you will have them.
Thank you very much.
President Reed.
Madam Chair, I'll hold for now if there are others that have questions, but I'd like to yield a portion of my time back to Alderman French to give him an opportunity to finish some of the questions he had.
I will say to you that we're going down the list and we will go back through the aldermen at the end because it appears that we will have some extra time. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Williamson. All right. I can't see that I've missed anybody.
No, Cruz not really asked. She asked. She did.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy, do you have additional questions?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had a chance to look through some of the policies, not read it all. As was mentioned earlier, after going through this, I'm sure we'll have other questions. I know I will. Question, though, on this particular policy, is this new? Was this adopted under the old state-controlled police board?
It is, in the majority of it. Like I said, there were some changes we eliminated the Board of Police Commissioners. This was essentially the policy, in substance, yes. I want to say, because there have been word changes here and there, but in principle, in concept, yes, it was.
So there's been no substantial or substantive change since the city of St. Louis has taken control?
That's correct. The newest, biggest change is the Force Investigative Unit, which I added at the back. So that was not under state control. That was something that I did under local control.
Okay. Could you walk us through, what happens when there's a use of, deadly force? What goes on? The officer reports in, just step by step what is supposed to happen and what you typically do.
And we're talking about the use of deadly force.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So now, with the creation of the Force Investigative Unit, there are police officers and a sergeant that are specifically trained in investigating use of force from police officers. So we will reconstruct the scene based on witness statements, based on officer testimony, based on any physical evidence, videos, whatever, and construct it and follow the investigation through. At the same time, there's to use an overused word in our culture right now, a bifurcated system, a two-pronged system.
Okay.
And so the criminal investigation is going like this. Those investigators are investigating the incident itself. At the same time, a parallel investigation starts for violations of rules, policies, procedures. Because somebody I think Alderwoman Phyllis talked about trying to keep those investigations separate, they do not cross over. One group of investigators does the internal side, one group does the criminal side, the actual shooting case, investigating the facts of that.
And who does which?
The Force Investigative Unit does the investigation of the scene, the shooting, the tactics. Internal Affairs does the investigation around policy violations. They share information except for the Garrity statements, the statements that the officers are compelled to give as a condition of their employment. So the two investigations go along. So both sides know the totality, but the investigations are conducted separately. Along the process on the Force Investigative side, when that report is completed, it goes to the Inspector of Police. We put together a tactical evaluation committee, which includes the Assistant Chief of Police, Al Atkins, the responsible commanders along the chain, review the incident, and I talked a little bit earlier about training. What do we need to do better? What can we do to improve our policies? The Internal Affairs investigation goes along to see if any of our policies, procedures, any violations occur. Once that investigation is done, it comes to me, make the evaluation. The other side, the Force Investigating Unit, that's the one that goes to the Circuit Attorney's Office. They look at the totality of the facts, except the Garrity statements, the officer statements, and they make a determination if a crime has occurred.
Okay. And that usually takes what kind of time period?
These investigations are thorough, they're detailed, long narratives, months. They do take months. And again, we go to the point about rushing to get the facts out, rushing to get the information. To Alderwoman Phyllis's to the point, I hear you very clearly about rushing to get the information out. The flip side of that coin is it looks like we're hiding or constructing some fact pattern that isn't real. So I hear you, the disclaimer, and I will have a bigger disclaimer. This is what I know now. I want to make sure that when that report is done, there aren't any surprises, that it is thorough, complete, and then the plan is, my desire is once that is done, to share everything that I can possibly share under the law, which in my mind is everything except the Garrity statements.
If the policy was to be changed now, then the approval of that would come from whom at this point?
Policies inside, like any other city department, the appointing authority, who in this case is the Chief of Police, makes the policies and procedures that happen inside the department. So that's where it is. And I forgot who asked. Certainly, conversation and feedback is important in developing policies that are strong and sound, open and transparent. So certainly not in a vacuum.
And are any of these information I asked you earlier about how many incidents were there in the past 5 years, is any of that information ever published or made available on a website or anything?
It is. In our annual report, we talk about IAD issues. We talk about a variety of things. Our annual report is finished through 12. I think our annual report, we're working on 13 now. We have to wait till the audited financials, which are July, so we just got those. But on our website, if you go to the Metropolitan Police Department's website, you can look at annual reports for years 12 and before, and they include a variety of things, numbers of arrests, numbers of internal affairs investigations, a variety of things. So that is available to the public, yes.
Okay. You know, several of us requested this meeting. We're appreciative that the chairman went along and decided to have it so we could get a real understanding of what the policy is, and even if necessary, weigh in on it and give some suggestions and thoughts. So we also want to hear at some point from the public and their thoughts about it as this committee makes its deliberation. But of course, some of the things that's in our mind is that relationship between race, ethnicity, and culture, and perceived positions of threat, which we know also play into these types of situations as well. And so I know some of my questions have been aimed in the direction of, one, trying to understand the policy and how that policy may affect the race issue. And we know that racism exists in St. Louis very, very, ardently. And so there's no need for us just to skirt over that and act like the race issue does not affect things. And it does. And so part of my inquiry is trying to get an understanding of that policy and perhaps how race might have played into that, because this might have also, it might have been within the guidelines, but this other issue is up under it, which we have not spoken to as plainly as I'm trying to speak to it right now.
And Alderman, I couldn't agree with you more, and I hear you very clearly. And that's why, even before Ferguson, I was talking to Judge Mason, who has an interest in this topic about implicit bias policing, implicit bias training. That's why we are headed that way. I think that every piece of training that we can do to help officers have a better understanding, I think it also has to go into the community. There is a distrust of the police department on the community, and I think that's the question that we have to have, not just what can law enforcement do to help that, and I think we do have a lot of work to do to help that, but what can we do as a city to try and help that. And I think these conversations and these dialogues are good, and I'm agreeing with you and supporting that, and we are trying to put those policies, practices, training in place in the police department. And I can't talk enough about community-oriented policing. I mean, just an example, and I won't belabor it, but the neighborhood ownership model is a great example of community-oriented policing. Trying to get more officers out into the neighborhoods. We make new recruits walk footbeats for the first 30 days, or during their 90 days, 30 days, to get accustomed to interacting with the community. I try and do all of those things. Are we perfect? Far from it. But I agree with you, there's room to grow on both sides.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Alderman Schmidt, anything come up?
Yeah, I think briefly, Chief, I mean, you've seen us struggle with this, and I'm sure that police officers do the same, and that is, it almost has to be second nature to you. I mean, because a police officer doesn't have time to go through this and say, okay, now what do I do next? So how often is there sort of a practice of these things? You know, I mean, they go to the shooting range, and I know we don't do that often enough because we can't, but how often are these practices practiced?
That's a great question. Every month, a police officer is required to sign that they have reviewed this policy. And we know a lot of times people just sign. So what we've done is we have test questions, and they're short, they're 3 questions, but they're test questions that rotate on a monthly basis that officers have to do some activity to positively acknowledge that they are aware of the use of force policy, that they take a 3-question test to make sure that they are familiar with it. So we do training on a monthly basis. Do I think that's enough? No. Right. Just recently, I, with the suggestion of Colonel O'Toole and Colonel Machero, have identified 3 sergeants to be training sergeants that will do training out in the area stations. So those 3 sergeants' responsibility is to have daily contact with our officers in the patrol divisions and give them skill training. How to do a car stop, how to approach for a felony arrest, how to talk to people, do a variety of things, because I do value training, and I think that. So we are a very large organization. We are changing in many ways and trying to be as nimble as we can. I'm pushing change in the organization at a pace that is very quick for something our size. Are we quick enough? No. Do I want to do more? Yes. We are. But all of the things that I'm hearing from you, and I like the conversation because I think it's good, and again, I've said it, I'll come back and have the conversation anytime you want and provide you anything that I can as soon as I can so you have the information. But we are trying, and I don't want that to get lost, whether it's implicit bias policing, whether it's training, whether it's the best policies. We are moving, and we are as progressive of an agency as I think you will find, certainly in the Midwest and perhaps around the country. The conversations about civilian review, body cameras, all of those things are happening in real time here in the city of St. Louis. So I appreciate your question. We do training. I value it, and not just gun on a target training, engagement training, use of force training, tactical approach training, all of those things.
I may have misunderstood this when the director indicated going down to Pine Bluff. Are we going down to Pine Bluff?
And that's a great question.
Let me say what my question is. My question is related to what Alderwoman Tyus said, which is, and I don't necessarily hold this, but I will express to you that I hear this a lot of times when there isn't a real connection between people. You know, if you don't have a police officer living in your community, and I don't have, frankly, I don't know if I have any. So when they come in, if they have the relationship with the community, which you're creating, I appreciate. But we have to be aware of the fact that now we have the MOU that says basically that police officers can live outside of the city and all that. If we're getting recruits
after 7 years,
from Pine Bluff, I think we really, really, really need to know that people are going to be concerned about that.
But, all right, then I'll follow.
Arkansas Pine Bluff, a great percentage of the students that attend there are from the St. Louis region.
Okay, so we're getting city residents. We're not going to we're not going to Pine Bluff to get residents of Pine Bluff.
We will get whatever qualified candidates that can meet the standards that we have for our department. And if they move here to St. Louis, that's in growing our community.
I understand that. I think we just need to be aware that that's another aspect of the concern that people have. It's like bringing mercenaries into a community. I mean, it is something to look at.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And to follow up on the director, I value diversity in the department. The 3 classes that I've had have been balanced in racial components. We have a tough time recruiting qualified candidates for our department. We compete with Anheuser-Busch, with Emerson, with everyone for an applicant pool. 2/3 of our applicants, the applicants, not the people that we hire, the applicants are white, 1/3 are African American. We've identified a 6-hour circle around St. Louis and are going to universities to recruit specifically minorities to apply for jobs in the city of St. Louis, because I want a workforce that is reflective of the community. In just the St. Louis workforce, the St. Louis community, we're not getting enough qualified applicants. We're not getting enough applicants, period. And so I have to increase that pool. I hear you. It's a real concern, but it's the reality of the world that we're living in right now.
And then on the body cameras, one thing that I had forgotten about is that some of the cities are finding that, you know, we already have a problem with witnesses, and knowing, you know, whether the conversations witnesses are having with police officers or on camera can cause witnesses not to come forward. So
well, and it's interesting, in today's paper, I believe it is, St. Louis County is introducing body cameras on some level, and their union said, certainly we believe it's a tool for officers, but on the same side, the community also needs to be aware that their interactions are going to be caught on video. So it is a great conversation, and something that I just kind of want to toss out that fits here, just a little bit. I'm very serious about having the most professional department that we can. In the 18 months or so that I've been in this position, there are 20 fewer people that are police officers because they were either fired, retired, or resigned under charges, and retired under charges. We do a good job of policing ourselves, always attentive to that, always can do better, but 20 fewer people are police officers in the last 18 or 20 months because of the attention that we've been paying to detail.
All right. President is pulling rank here. He would like to make some comments or ask questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, thanks for coming today, and thanks for your candid answers. But the question I have, the first question I have is on the Civilian Review Board, because up until a minute ago, or actually 15, 20 minutes ago, I had no idea that you guys were working on the Civilian Review Board, so I have some questions related to that. The first question is, who's involved in the discussions of a Civilian Review Board? Is it just you, or is it the department? Is it the mayor's office? Who's all involved?
No, the people that are involved currently is Alderman Kennedy,
Okay.
myself, and Chief Dotson.
Okay, so the Civilian Review Board, the final thing that we would see, would it be policy-based or would it be ordinance-based?
Ordinance-based.
Ordinance-based, okay. So it's the one, so you're in discussion with Alderman Kennedy about that Civilian Review Board? Okay, okay, that was my first question. I'm good with that, yeah. Next question, Chief, one of the things, it seems to me, and that's why I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to talk, because I wanted to see if the answers were still centered around the same idea that what's happening on the streets, a lot of it has to do with the training and the policies that are in place. That's what it seems like you continue to say. If, for example, if a suspect is fatally shot, it's because of the training and policies that are in place. Or if more people are pulled over, it's because the training and policies are in place. So my next question is to you: what is being done to look at how we can begin to change that training and policy, those policies and the underlying training, so that we have a police force that people are more comfortable with, or people feel like as if they're going to get a fair shake, they're not going to see people unfairly shot on the streets of the city and things of that nature. And also, if you know of any national policies and training that has been moved in the last year.
So, and those are great questions. I think we touched on a little of them early on. Part of the Force Investigative Unit, the new unit that was formed, is to identify training aspects, policies, procedures that need to be updated and changed, and then put them into practice. Our policy, the use of force policy that you see, the one that you had before, is based on Department of Justice research, Department of Justice guidelines, along with rulings from the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, about reasonableness, about what the officers knew at the time. So we have one of the more, on the spectrum, I would say we lean towards more conservative, more restrictive in our policies compared to some agencies. We certainly are more detailed in our policy than some agencies. So I think what we do is, as we have experiences that and experiences could be training activities that we have in other cities, policies that are seen, new law that's forged through the courts, that we update our policies and do training on it. Is there a magic wand that we can wave and get to this point? I think dialogue and conversation like we're having here, out in the community and the neighborhoods. So one, the community understands where we are now, where we're trying to get to, and we understand as law enforcement where the community is, what their concerns are, and begin to address them. I think we do it from a variety of things: a more diverse workforce, a better trained workforce, more policies, better policies, not more policies, better policies. So all of those things, and we do that. We do critical incident reviews, we do training, we send people to schools all over to bring back their ideas.
Okay, so, and I'm going to try to drill down and get a little more detail here. So specifically, could you give me an idea of what policy or what training could we implement starting today or as soon as we have the funding to do it, to change what we see happening as it relates to deadly force being applied on the streets?
And to kind of,
or are we back?
And so to answer your question, what policy changes, what would you like to see do differently? And then I can kind of help me, because this is what I'm trying to draw out.
Well, what I would like to see differently is, just like Alderman Carter and Alderman French and the rest of it, I don't know who else had an opportunity to speak to you and hear about the details of what happened, you know, in Riverview with Mr. Powell. But when you saw the video looked completely different than what we all expected, and it was shocking once we saw the video. I don't know, maybe you were shocked also when you saw the video, but it was indeed shocking. So when you look at the video and you say, well, that guy was not, you know, the officers, you know, didn't appear to be in any imminent danger, but it could be because of their training and their, you know, everything from diversity training to, training on use of deadly force and all that stuff came into play and led to what we saw there, right? But certainly, I would think that we should have been able to see that go down differently. You know, that's why I'm leaning on you as the public safety professional to say that, yes, you know, there are policy changes and training that has happened other places in the United States that lead to different outcomes.
And and that is a great question. And these are questions that I struggle with and am challenging my command staff all the time to come up with answers for. I don't want to talk about Riverview in specifics because that's still an ongoing investigation. But in general, when officers encounter individuals, we talked about de-escalation, the use of force continuum. We've talked about de-escalation. We have introduced tools like tasers, conductive energy weapons, in the department in the past. Are they foolproof? Are they fail-safe? No, they're not. We've taught officers how to transition from deadly force to non-deadly force and vice versa.
What do they have to do to transition from deadly force to non-deadly to deadly force? What is that transition?
It depends on the situation. So in a situation where they're confronted by an armed suspect, is their life in danger? I think that's the first question that you have to ask. Is the officer's life in danger? And then we can have a whole series of conversations about that. So each scenario is different. So let's just, an officer is confronted with a suspect with a gun. Certainly a life and death scenario for the officer. We agree? Do we agree on that?
Yes.
So the use of